I recently began working on a new painting, which is this one right here. As you can see from the photo, yes, there's definitely a kitty in the painting. As of right now, I only completed the acrylic underpainting. Yes, it doesn't look like much of an underpainting, but to me, it is enough information to know where to apply the next few layers of paint, which will be in oil, of course. But before I even start, I need to mix a batch of colors. Hello and welcome. My name is Charlenbos. I go by Bob, and I'm not your typical painter. And in today's video, I'm going to show you how I prepare for a oil painting by mixing a batch of colors. As mentioned before, I already laid out the underpainting in acrylic, but I'm going to put oil on top of it. Yes, oil over acrylic. Acrylic dries very quickly, and it lets you lay out the groundworks of a composition without the long dry time of oil. But when it comes to fine detail, oil paint is definitely ideal, especially when it comes to mixing colors, because they take a long time to dry. And that is something I like to do in the beginning stages of an oil painting, to have a nice batch of colors to work with. Just so you know, the colors I am going to mix are mainly base colors. What I mean by that, I will probably modify them as I paint. In some ways, it's almost a tug of war trying to get the right color, whether it's making it a little lighter or adding a complementary color to neutralize it. But more on that later in the video. The base colors that I will mix today are this bright red wood, as well as this darker red that's cooler, plus the concrete right here, which is painted, but there's chips. One darker shade and one lighter shade, and lastly this very bright tone of faded wood, as well as this darker orangish tone. Another thing I want to say is that color mixing is not an exact science. The goal is really to get as close as possible and then manipulate it, and that's where the tug of war occurs, where you make slight adjustments. This is also a very experimental video. I haven't done many on color mixing, but I thought by showing you the process it might be helpful. So let me know in the comments if this was helpful. Warning to you acrylic painters, you will not have the same advantage of oil paint staying wet longer. So keep that in mind when you mix a big batch of colors, that they might go to waste. Of course, there's ways to keep acrylic paint wet, but nothing like oil to get the tone or color you desire. And sometimes it's just a tad bit of one little color that makes a very big difference. Anyhow, without any further delay, let's mix some paint. One of the first colors I like to mix first is an extreme dark. With that said, I like to use Viridian and Alizarin Crimson. Depending on the amount of each color you use, your dark will be either very warm or on the greenish cooler side. Alizarin Crimson is more potent, so if you want something closer to black, do something like 35-40% Alizarin Crimson versus 65-60 Viridian. I did roughly 50-50 because I do want it to be on the warmer tone. As you can see, Alizarin Crimson is more powerful than Viridian. The mixture ended up being too warm, so I added more Viridian. This is just a base color for my darks. Depending on where I use it, it will be definitely manipulated a little bit. Another thing I want to mention is my surface area is actually clean. I am using a piece of glass that is on my table, and all the grimy dirt and paint you see is actually below the glass, including a few hairs. Also, for the rest of the video, I'm not going to bore you too much with the tedious vision of me mixing paint. I will definitely speed through those sections. But I definitely want to mention that you should mix your paint very thoroughly, especially if you want a very uniform color. It is also good to have 2 palette knives, or more actually, but 2 for mixing paint. The second knife comes in handy, especially for scraping some of the paint off the other knife and not waste it. After mixing my dark, I put it to the side. Now it is time to mix other colors. But first, you have to clean the area where you are going to work, which is why it's good to have a rag with you. The next color I'm going to try to mix is the red on the bench. A red is not just a red, it could be warm, it could be cool, it could be dark, it could be light. As you can see, I have 4 colors. Obviously, I have cadmium red, but I also have cadmium orange, yellow, and titanium white. These are pure colors and not hues. Hues are actually colors that mimic the pure colors, and because they are colors that have been mixed with other colors, if you try to use them, you will get muddier results. So if possible, try to stick to pure colors and not hues. Anyhow, I started by grabbing some titanium white because it is on the pale side this color I am trying to mix. I split the white in two because I'm not sure how much I really need to lighten the red. In a way, I test the waters first by applying a small amount of white to the red. It seems that a small amount of white didn't do much to lighten it. So instead, I'm going to do the reverse. I'm going to apply a small bit of red to the big batch of white. In the end, the color is still too dark and not light enough, but it still is missing something, which in my opinion is yellow. Especially since it is in direct sunlight, this red needs to appear a lot more brighter. So after scraping the excessive paint from the knife, I grab my cadmium yellow. I squeeze a small amount and then I start to mix it with the red and white I prepared earlier. Just like before, I test the waters with a small amount of yellow first. Keep in mind that you can always add small increments of a color to make a mixture, but you cannot remove the color once the mixture is made, and it would be a shame to waste a lot of expensive paint. Anyhow, as I mix this yellow into the red and white, I'm starting to like it, but it needs to be lighter. So I put the red I made earlier that does not have yellow in it to the side to make room for the titanium white in order to lighten the batch I made with the yellow. I am pretty confident that I need quite a bit of white, so I grab a good portion of it and start to mix it with the yellow and red I had mixed just a moment ago. I practically liked the tone of the red, but I knew it was too dark, and titanium white will definitely make it lighter. The ultimate goal is to get the base color of the bright red that's in the sunlight. Though this batch I just made is not light enough, I save a small portion in case I need to use it to darken certain areas. But I know I need to make a even lighter batch. Therefore, I grab even more white to make the mixture even lighter. Sometimes you need more variations of the same color, whether it's light or dark, warm or cool, just to have, especially when you need to distinguish subtle differences. Now I put the color I just made to the side. It's not perfect to the color in the photo, but it's definitely a good base color. I could definitely make it more light and even add a little more yellow to it as well, but that will be something I do as I apply it to the canvas. Right now, I need to make something a little more cooler, and that will be part of the wood that is in the shade. So in preparation, I squeeze a little bit of titanium white, 3 little batches, just in case I need to go lighter and lighter. But I also introduce cobalt blue. I'm testing the waters again with just a small amount at first, just so I can see how the paint reacts. Not only is the blue cooling it, but it also is neutralizing it a bit. The reason why is the yellow and red make an orange tone, and orange is the complementary of blue, and when complementary colors are mixed together, they neutralize each other. As I mix the colors, I am liking the results so far, but like the light red, I feel like it's necessary to make a variation of this. So I put some to the side, and immediately I try to make a variation of this color, one that is a little bit darker. So I add more cobalt blue. Then I start mixing the paint until I get a uniformed color. Again, I'm just trying to get the base color of what I see. As I paint, I probably will make variations, possibly more orange, or possibly more white, or even maybe a totally different color to get the correct tone that I see. I place the color to the side, and now it is time to start a new color. And the color I chose was the concrete that is below the bench, and it actually has 2 tones of white. Most likely because it was painted over a different tone of color, and later the top coat started to peel. And my goal is to show this imperfection. Don't be surprised that the first color I grab is white. It is a very pale color, but a white is not just a white. You have to look very carefully to see another tone of color possibly. This white appears to be on the blue tone. Therefore, I added a bit of cobalt blue to the mix. But after mixing it thoroughly, it appears it is missing something. It possibly needs to be a little bit more purple. That is why I introduced a tad bit of alizarin crimson. I use only a small amount because alizarin crimson is very powerful. After starting to mix it, it appears that the color is still missing something, and that color I believe will be orange. So I squeeze a little bit of orange and I add it to the mixture I already have. I test the waters first to see what the orange will do, at least a small amount, and it does seem like it is getting the results I want, which is neutralizing the purplish tone blue. So after mixing it, I put it to the side. Now it is time to mix a slightly darker version of this color. In order to get it, I start off by using my titanium white and cobalt blue mixture that I had left to the side and add a bit of alizarin crimson to the mix. I am pretty much trying to get a darker version of the color I have already mixed. With that said, I add more cobalt blue and some orange too, enough in a way to darken it a bit. The reason being is that I have the thought that I might have to use a slightly darker tone at one point, and it's good to have it ready when I paint the concrete. Keep in mind that mixing color in a way is kind of like tug of war. Sometimes you have to add small amounts of color until the mixture appears just right for you. And if you truly messed up, you could always start again. But hopefully it's only a small amount of paint and the mixture you made by mistake can be used somewhere else. So I put the color to the side, and now it is time to make a lighter version, one that is almost white. I'm going to do something different here. Instead of wiping my palette, I will instead introduce white paint to the residue of the blue that's left over. I figured that the tone of the white will be very similar, and a small tad bit of that paint is enough to give the white the tone I need. As I mix the color, I get the sense it needs a little bit more cobalt blue. So I introduce a little bit into the mixture and I mix away. As I'm doing it, I notice it needs something else as well. So I add a tad bit of white as well as some orange. Sometimes the color you desire is created by small increments of color, like in this situation. I put it to the side, and now it's time to mix some of the variations of that white. There are a few sections that are kind of stained, and I wanted to capture them. So I use that base color I just mixed that's very light, and introduce a little bit of orange into it. I do not feel the tone is dark enough, and on top of that, it is too warm. So I add cobalt blue to not only neutralize the color, but also darken it. In return, the color looks very rusty orange, which is what I was looking for. Now it is time to mix one final variation for the concrete. For this tone, I'm also using the base color of the concrete, but I'm using also a tad bit of red. After feeling it was not sufficient enough, I added a bit of cobalt blue too, and then a little bit of red again. In a way, this mixture was experimental, because I was adding blue and red at different points until the color seemed right, but I felt it was still missing something. So I added a little bit of orange too. Once I feel the color is sufficient, I put it to the side and then I move on to the next one. This one will be a lot more simpler. It is practically the very bright spot on the bench. It is so bright that the sun pretty much makes it almost pure white. I bring out my titanium white, and with that I'm going to start off by mixing a very small amount of cadmium yellow. Then I start to mix away. As I'm mixing, I noticed that small amount was actually too much. So I cut the mixture in half and use one half with more white in hopes that this mixture will be lighter and more suitable for the bench. So like before, I take the two mixtures of white I made and put them to the side and prepare to make another color. For this one, I'm going to speed through it, but I will explain the colors that I am mixing. It is practically some variations for the bottom wood of the bench where someone would sit on. I notice it is in the shadow and it is pale, so I start off with cadmium orange and white. But I introduce a little bit of cobalt blue also, in a way to darken it and also neutralize the orange a bit so it's not bright. At one point, I notice it is too blue, so I add more orange again. And then at one point, I split that color mixture I made and add cobalt blue to that half with the purpose of making it darker. That mixture was not dark enough for some sections, probably because there is white in it. So I squeeze out some more cadmium orange in case I need more, but also some red. I was trying to get a dark purple, so the next color I try to mix is with the cobalt blue and cadmium red with a dash of orange. I like that mixture, but I still wanted to try to get a slightly darker variation of it. So I cut the mixture I made in half, and I add more cobalt blue to the other half. And that seems about right. It is very important that you save your paint. If you're not going to use it, store it in an airtight container, and if possible, put it also in the freezer. That way all of your effort mixing paint does not go to waste. If you made it to the end, thanks for watching. I truly do appreciate it, and hopefully you found some value in this video, and that it helped you understand how to mix colors a bit. For more of my work, check out my Instagram, not your typical painter of course, and also my Etsy shop, if you want to see what's available. Anyhow, until next time, bye for now.